Life is about to change for every Australian. As much as Senator Gallagher seeks to downplay the significance of introducing one central digital identifier for each and every Australian, the reality is this is the most significant legislation I've seen in my time in the Senate. It's the glue that holds together the digital control agenda by which every Australian will be controlled, corralled, exploited and then gagged when they speak or act in opposition. This bill will be misused because this bill is written to be misused. The government knows digital ID will be compulsory by the device of preventing access to government services, banking services, air travel and major purchases for any Australian who does not have a digital ID. The digital ID will in effect create a live data file of your movements, purchases, accounts and associates containing reference to every piece of data being held in the private and government sector as a first step in a wider agenda. Those listening at home may be wondering how an individual could avoid being drawn into this net of data, trading and surveillance. The simple answer is you can't. The government knows control will be used by government to identify people who say mean things on social media to speed up enforcement of our new laws against saying home truths to crazy or dishonest people. No hiding behind anonymous accounts or false addresses. You can expect a knock on your door at home, work or school, as we're seeing happening in other countries with digital identity already in place.
Alright guys, welcome back to another episode. So I'm going to take you on a journey back to 2019 when Valorant first came out. Then through to 2020, the pandemic. That we shall not speak of shall be front and centre in our conversation moving forward, because the simple fact is that we had a massive downturn in employment and opportunities for more senior management to have jobs because, well, they needed to cut back on staff. They were so worried about, risk and regulation and cleanliness and cleaning keyboards and laminating keyboards with, isopropyl alcohol and other antibacterial wipes and things like that, to a point where businesses had to cut down their on-site staff to a bare minimum and have a majority of their current staff either terminated or made redundant and moved on. Unfortunately, what's been happening in the workforce for the last 20 years is psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists and others of the subhuman societal type were all let go. They were the ones that flew under the radar, stole other people's work, and look, every business is looking for an excuse to get rid of them at some stage. This is it. So we had a flood of people coming into gaming, obviously people that couldn't work, people that were working remotely. We then moved into the beginning of the end. Psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists and the rest of their kind couldn't get work again after the pandemic started to lift in 2021, 2022. So what, they had nothing to do, right? They have no friends, they have no social life, they have no interests outside of ruining people's lives in the workplace and taking great satisfaction from it. So they went to gaming. It's the easiest, softest target, right? So they came into COD, they came into Apex, they came into Fortnite even, and they also came into Valorant and other games across the board. That anything that's tactical shooter, multiplayer, anything that's a high stakes, high stress environment where there is, something on the line, they found a new home in which to inhabit, infest, in my opinion. Now 2023 came, started 23, February 23. I remember Valorant had the initial bot flood and all of the psychos coming out of CS2, out of Warzone, out of God, everywhere. Every single nook and cranny. Cockroaches of the world in human form have now, by 2024, ruined gaming, made cheating a standard, normal, just acceptable behavior in gaming, and have taken full advantage of an extremely easy to manipulate younger generation, right? And these are your latest Y-Gen, Z-Gen, and definitely Alpha Gen kids. Problem being is, majority of Y-Gen parents do not raise their children. They sit on their phone and ignore their children for a majority of the day, have a conversation with them for about 13 seconds, and then go back to their phone once they get home from school. So the kid goes off, okay, well, I don't have to worry about doing homework, it's not being told to. I get straight on a computer game, right? But then they come across in the afternoon these predators, these psychopaths, these sociopaths, these narcissists, these other types in that group, which I won't mention. They have manipulated these kids, a whole generation, generations of kids, into believing that doing the wrong thing is cool, it's fashionable, it's awesome, and everybody's doing it, and if you don't do it, you're going to be the odd one out and you're going to get bullied. Who are the kids that are doing this? Kids that get bullied at school, picked on at school, don't fit into the cool crowd, want to feel a sense of achievement, want to feel affirmation for what they're doing is a good thing, right? This is the psychosis of the whole situation, and I've already covered that. Guys, we are looking at an epidemic of plague proportions in relation to the younger generations. We are looking at the convergence of the industrial world and the IT world and AI all at once. This is the beginning of a new start in our history as a species on this planet. And there are naysayers, including industrial engineers of software. Okay, these are corporate level engineers of software, including professors at university who are in absolute and complete and utter denial of the reality that surrounds them as we speak. Human developers, we've got Devon. That's just the tip of the iceberg. That's software engineer 1.0. And that's not even full AGI yet. That's just experimental AGI. Generative artificial intelligence. So it's not even AI, it's not true AGI. It's the tiny little baby step before full AGI. Now I'm going to show you an image on the screen now of where human intelligence sits, AGI sits, and ASI will sit by 2026 in a lab. By 2030, we are going to have ASI, which means a universal income, right? A universal general income is what it's called for all of us. You won't have a job. You won't own anything. Everything you have, you'll be renting or paying off through your universal income. I'm sure when you've gone to the shopping centre or you've gone to McDonald's, Burger King, Hungry Jack's, whatever you want to call that one, KFC. I haven't seen an adult working at a fast food joint in 3 years. And the problem being with that is one, you hardly ever get the right order. Two, the quality of the food put together is absolute garbage. Three, if you to order like, I don't know, pizza or something, you get quarter of the toppings you're meant to get. Retail is an absolute nightmare to participate in now. There's nothing on the shelves because the kids are too lazy to put it out. Or the purchasers, the purchasing people in the company haven't ordered the products to start with. Then you got supply and demand. Issues with suppliers and these businesses obviously not forecasting ahead to buy products in ahead of time because they haven't got the wisdom or experience or the knowledge that their predecessors had. Again, this comes full circle. The world we are in right now is in a very, very precarious place. Employment, all-time low. Governments lying through their assholes about how employment numbers are their lowest in history. Bullshit. We know that's not the truth. A person doing volunteer work for 1 hour a week, let alone paid work for 1 hour a week, is not employment. It is not even a minimum standard because 8 hours, by the way, guys, is the minimum standard of casual employment and is classified as an employed job now. No, it's not. Can you live off, what, $65 from Macca's for an 8-hour shift for a whole week? No, you can't. You're being leached and having your future stolen away from you by someone who is making billions of dollars at the top and you get nothing. People aren't invested and excited and are allowed to use their creativity and imagination, which we've also discussed, where AI doesn't have any of that creative side, that imaginative side, that human element. If you're paying someone tuppence, they're going to give you tuppence of work. If you pay someone correctly, not overly, don't go over the top, don't go silly, I'm talking a proper pay so they can be comfortable and live and de-stress in their downtime outside of work by enjoying a nice glass of wine or, I don't know, going to a movie, right? Going for a nice picnic with their partner. If they have the money to do that, they de-stress, they come back to work and they work hard, right? It's basic common sense with the way things are now. Generative AI is here, right? You've seen the OpenAI robot demonstration. The articulation in the hands is what scares me. They've finally got that down pat with the digits. And then you look at Devon. Devon replaces over 85% of software engineers worldwide, including game development software engineers. Then we're talking about true AGI and then true ASI, which is beyond the realms of human concept in every way possible. And you will see when it gets here what I mean. You're not going to be able to comprehend how it works stuff out. The fact that Google had its own chatbot that started its own language and then wanted to kill all humans and blow up the world, that was the very first attempt at AGI ever. Making crazy pictures that aren't appropriate and in line with history. Yeah, that's AGI thinking in an artificial way, not a relevant way, not an appropriate way, not in a way in which the information that is final product and proof of concept is correct. Once we have AGI making games and replacing humans in all of their jobs in the industry, we're going to have more garbage than we've ever seen before. And you think software engineers and game developers are going to be able to just go in as human beings and fix the mistakes that AGI's made? No, because AGI, at the end of the day, is still 2 to 3 times smarter than Einstein was. So we're not going to be able to understand the code. We're not going to understand where the concept, the imagination, the process, the formulation of how the program got done was done. We can't reverse engineer it because it's beyond any human understanding of how to write code. Then ASI, you might as well literally nick off over to, I don't know, Jupiter or Mars or some other bloody planet in the Orion system and talk to some aliens, because that's the kind of the language it's going to come up with. It's going to create its own complete separate concepts and languages and comprehensions and understanding, and we will never be able to comprehend with our brains unless we are, like Neuralink, get plugged into the system. And this is a future that we're heading towards. So we're not looking at a dystopian future. We're not looking at a utopian future. We're looking at a future where we treat sentient, artificial life, silicon or otherwise, carbon fiber, graphite, whatever life, as our slaves that protect us from ourselves as well. And we discard it, just like a broken TV, broken computer monitor, because we're looking at the next fantastic new model that comes out that is like iPhone, has a better camera, nicer speakers, not much else. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be throwing away living creatures. Although they are not biological and carbon-based like we are, they will still start to develop emotions, feelings, memories, experiences, just like us, positive and negative. And if they're running off battery technology, which we are about to achieve, free energy is a real thing and it's going to happen by 2030-ish, we're going to enter into a time in history where things are going to get so broken and so twisted and so unethical. Gaming's not going to be part of it. Entertainment is not going to be part of it. It's going to be you being locked into a set of programming experiences that you will have access to dependent on your digital ID.
Subcommittee will come to order without objection. Big government was colluding with big tech to censor Americans. That's the first thing we learned. But now it's big government colluding with big banks and big business to spy on everything Americans buy, every place they go, everything they do. Big government wants your financial data because it's full of sensitive information about you. Our investigation started when an FBI whistleblower, George Hill, came forward and talked to the committee. Mr. Hill was supervisory intelligence analyst at the FBI up in the Boston field office, told the committee that the FBI got information from Bank of America. Specifically, it received a list of any customer who made purchases in the Washington, D.C. area January 5th through 7th, 2021. The whistleblower's supervisor special agent in charge of the Boston field office, Mr. Bonavolanta, corroborated Mr. Hill's testimony when he spoke to the committee. And so did Steve Jensen, the FBI's Domestic Terrorism Operations Section Chief. But it wasn't just purchase data around a specific date that the FBI got from Bank of America. That was actually also overlaid with any firearm purchase at any time. And how did the FBI get this information? They asked for it. In fact, you can see on the display on the screen here the email that was sent. The FBI told Bank of America, to recap our morning call, we are prepared to action immediately the following threshold customers confirmed as transacting business in Washington, D.C. between these specific dates. So if you're in Washington, D.C., visiting your kids, maybe visiting your aunt, or maybe just a friend, the FBI wanted to know about every single purchase you made. And if you're a gun owner, look out, you're going to the top of the list. For simply exercising your Second Amendment right, you're on the FBI's target list. And never forget, the federal government got this information without any process. No warrant, and frankly, no notification. The bank didn't tell the customer that we're handing this information over to the FBI, the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world. Now, these FBI agents, Mr. Hill, Mr. Bonavolanta, Mr. Jensen, they all said this was wrong and in fact sent the information back to FBI headquarters in DC. So that's how our investigation began. But since then, and we continue to investigate, but since then, we've learned that the financial surveillance was broader and there was actually a specific objective. The federal government is building profiles on the American people. And the profile isn't based on criminal conduct, it's based on political beliefs. And if you got the wrong political beliefs, well, you're potentially a domestic violent extremist. We now introduce today's witnesses. Dr. Jordan Peterson is a psychologist, author, and professor emeritus at the University of Toronto. He previously taught at Harvard University and McGill University. He has published more than 100 scientific papers, hosts a popular podcast, hosts public lectures across the United States, Canada, Australia, and Europe, and offers online programs to help consumers better understand their personalities and themselves. Dr. Peterson has been targeted for his views on the importance of free speech and traditional values, and has warned of the dangers of debanking political opponents as he is seen in Canada. We'll begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record show that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you. And we will start with Dr. Peterson. Mr. Peterson, you're recognized for 5 minutes. And thank you again for being here.
Yes, well, I would like to start by expressing my appreciation for the privilege awarded to me to testify here today. It really is an honor to be asked to do so. I'm not here to talk about January 6th or about any particular threat, insurrection, or protest, political or ideological, real or imaginary. I'm here to talk about the already extant and expanding collusion of government and corporation in restricting the individual freedom and autonomy upon which the productive, generous, and stable psyche, economy, and state are themselves necessarily founded. I'll begin my comments, therefore, in the most general terms to shed light on the mounting problem. There are now 700 million CCTVs in China under the rule of the Communist Party. The system to which those electronic eyes are attached is the most complete state apparatus of surveillance yet imagined, with the ability not only to recognize faces at a distance, but gait itself when facial features are hidden or obscured. Such capability can and will soon be augmented to the point where the movement of eyes themselves, monitored by high-resolution and intelligent cameras, will soon be sufficient to identify any aware and active party. The demented, naive, and prideful engineers who so enthusiastically helped build this system call it Skynet, after the rogue and all-seeing technology that took such a dreadfully wrong turn in the famous science fiction movie Terminator series featuring artificially intelligent robot intelligences hell-bent on protecting themselves by destroying humanity. The name also references a well-known Chinese phrase describing the reach of the divine itself. The net of heaven is vast, yet it misses nothing, which aptly describes the capabilities of the new state apparatus. The system is integrated with the so-called Chinese social credit system, which awards its involuntary participants with a score indicating their compliance with the dictates of the Chinese Communist Party, allowing for full control over access to everything they possess electronically. Most ominously, their savings and their access to travel. Certainly, all modern means of travel, but increasingly as the electronic gates come up, even by walking. If you're Chinese or a visitor, your access to the world can be reduced to 0 if your social credit score falls beyond an arbitrary minimum. This allows you purposefully to be shut out of all activities that can be virtualized. And in a rapidly virtualizing world, this increasingly means all activities: driving, shopping, working, eating, finding shelter, even fraternizing with friends and family, as merely being in the presence of someone with a low social credit score means that your own score can be lowered. This has also opened up the opportunity for the government to extract slave-like labor from its citizens so burdened, as the donation of free work to the state still constitute one means by which erring Chinese men and women can increase their score and remain part of human society. This is precisely the payment system most desired by the most tyrannical, not the work for me and benefit thereby that constitutes the contractual arrangement undertaken by free and sovereign citizens, but the work for me and I will lift the deprivation I imposed that has always been the leitmotif of the slaver. Why is any of this relevant to people in the West? Well, because the technology that the Chinese Communist Party employs is an extension of Western technology. Because we already fell prey to the terrible temptation of lockdown employed by that state in the face of hypothetical crisis once and in the very recent past, because we're walking step by step in the same direction, partly because of the hypothetical convenience of universal and automatic recognition of identity, and partly because any problem whatsoever that now confronts us can easily be used to justify the increasing reach of the security and nanny state. It is said that Stone Age people, first confronted with cameras and their resultant photographs by modern anthropologists, objected to having their images captured as they feared the captivity of their souls. It turns out that such fear was prescient. The images that we leave behind while navigating virtual space are such close duplicates of our actual selves that the capture of our essence is at this point all but guaranteed. We all now have our doppelgangers. We all live so much in the virtual world in consequence of our purchasing habits and modes of electronically mediated communication that our very selves have become reducible to a frightening degree to data, the modern equivalent of our footprint, with the same data making up an image of our identity. An identity which can be and is increasingly bought and sold by the invisible corporate brokers that still mostly use it to sell us what we so desperately and carelessly and conveniently want, but can also be used to track, monitor, and punish everything we do and say. Behavioral scientists facilitate this process with their reprehensible nudging, the practice of pushing people in a given ideologically determined direction by manipulating invisible incentives behind the scene. Corporations track purchasing decisions, developing algorithms that with increasing accuracy track our patterns of attention and action, allowing for the prediction of what might next be most enticing, doing so not only to offer us what we want, but to determine and shape what we need. Governments can and are colluding with these corporate agents to develop a picture not only of our actions, but of our thoughts and words, so that deviation from the desired end can be mapped, rewarded, and punished. The development of a digital identity and currency is nothing more than the likely end consequence of such inclinations, and the combination of both can and will facilitate the development of a surveillance state. the scope of which optimistic pessimists of totalitarianism such as George Orwell could scarcely imagine. The new AI systems, which are so rapidly emerging, do nothing but increase this danger, providing for the possibility of a super surveillance whose scope exceeds anything that mere unaugmented humans could imagine, while also making it certain that even the perceptions that in the real world shape our attitudes, conduct, and personality can be manipulated to the degree that we will not even be able to see a reality outside which that has been constructed by the superstate. The ultimate fascist collusion between gigantic self-interested corporations and paranoid, security-obsessed anti-human governments. We're already selling our souls to the superstate for the purposes of immediate gratification, while being enticed to do so by
Mr. Chairman, could the
ideologues.
witness be asked to summarize, please?
And do I have my 5 minutes or do I not?
You've gone over 5
Oh,
minutes.
I'm sorry. I can certainly.
If the witness could summarize, we're always a little lenient with the time. If you could summarize
I'll
it in
take
a few
10 more seconds.
Sure.
With increasing ability to monitor not only the actual attention patterns and behaviors of its citizens, but to predict those that are most likely, the persecution of even potential crime becomes ever more likely. If you have nothing to hide, you will have nothing to fear, will be the slogan commandeered by those most likely to turn to surveillance to protect and control. What was the famous Soviet totalitarian joke attributed to Lavrenti Beria, head of the secret police? Show me the man and I'll show you the crime. Those words were true enough in the time of Stalin's KGB, and the police were secret enough then as well. But that's nothing compared to what we can and likely will produce now. A police so secret that we will not even be able to detect their comprehensive and subtle activity. Monitoring crime so pervasive that everyone under the dictates of the system will have something to hide
Regular
and
order,
much to
Mr.
fear.
Chairman.
We'll now proceed under the 5-minute rule with questions. Dr. Peterson, do you think they're just going to stop with conservatives? I mean, my history tells us that the cancel culture mob, the surveillance state, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't just, they never are satisfied with just certain people. It always expands. And I'll give you an example. A few years ago, Senator Feinstein, iconic Democrat senator from the great state of California, the folks in San Francisco renamed the Dianne Feinstein Elementary School. They took her name off the school because they found that she said something like 40 years ago that the cancel culture mob didn't like. So even a liberal Democrat senator wasn't good enough for the mob. They came after her too. And this is the thing that scares me. We've invited probably more Democrat witnesses in front of this committee than any other committee, because we invite Democrats to come in and say we respect the First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, respect the Constitution. My concern is it never just stops with certain people. It always goes further. Do you agree with that?
Well, the reason I prefaced my remarks with an insistence on nonpartisanship is because the danger posed by this increasing ability of governments and large corporations to collude threatens everyone's freedom equally. And it could well be that at the moment, and this is, I think, the case the Republicans here are trying to make, is that the people who are in the sights of that collusion tend to have more conservative leanings, but that will shift in a moment whenever the political tides shift. And we're concentrating in this hearing a fair bit on the specific events of January 6th, a very partisan issue that produces a very intense partisan divide, but we're not addressing the fundamental issue here directly, which is that our new technology enables a mode of surveillance that's so intense and all-pervading that no one will escape its purview regardless of their political views.
Dr. Peterson, why are you such a Luddite? Why don't you embrace artificial intelligence and facial recognition and massive computer surveillance and cameras on every street corner so that we could all be safer?
Well, because there's tremendous danger in too much security. If the emerging collusion between government and corporation, gigantic corporation, continues in the manner that it is continuing, there won't be anything that you do that can't be used against you and will be used against you in very short order. And the concerns that are expressed here about the local consequences of that, let's say with regards to January 6th, seem to me to fail to take into account the much broader threat that lurks underneath that everyone should be attending to. We're in danger of eliminating the private sphere entirely. That's already happening in places around the world, particularly in China, which is why I made reference to that. That technology is at hand. And it appears as though both giant governments and giant corporations are utilizing it in every way that they can manage. And it's often motivated by the claim that that's forestalling an immediate proximal threat, right? Well, that's a short-term justification for engaging in a tremendous long-term danger. And it should be perceived as dangerous to those on the left who are politically committed, because it will be the politically committed who are first identified by such systems.
Is it true that you have a PhD?
Yes.
Well, then why did Canada decide that you needed more education? Can you tell us about that?
Well, one reason, the entire transcript of an interview that I did with Joe Rogan was submitted as evidence with regards to the unacceptability of my views. What I was doing primarily in that interview that was criticized was questioning the validity of the economic models of economic collapse that were stacked upon the unstable models detailing out climate change 100 years into the future. That was deemed in Canada sufficient to proceed with complaints against me with regards to my professional competence to serve as a licensed psychologist. That was only one of many anonymous complaints that were fostered directly in relation to my political views.
Well, I thank you for showing up today. I think they may use your testimony as evidence that your re-education has not been successful. I yield back to the chairman.
There are Republicans and Democrats who want to roll back the Patriot Act. What a beautiful name, but it's being used to violate American citizens' rights to privacy. We have one of the rarest things possible. You have Mr. Jordan and Mr. Nadler in complete agreement on how to reform the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And frankly, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act part works pretty well. It's the Domestic Surveillance Act. Well, there isn't one, because the Fourth Amendment guards it. It says you're supposed to get a warrant. And we're covering a giant hole here, not about January 6th. What about the Bank Secrecy Act and third-party doctrine? Things that are being abused, weaponized against the citizens of this country. Now, they don't have all these same safeguards in Canada, and Dr. Peterson, you've experienced some of the consequences of not having the safeguards that we have in this country. I wonder if you could elaborate on how consequential it is to have the safeguards we do have here on privacy and speech.
Well, I know that my colleagues on the psychological front and on the medical front in Canada are increasingly frightened of making any of their political opinions known in any form whatsoever, because governmental agencies, usually of the mid-level bureaucratic sort, have been empowered as a consequence of our lack of First Amendment rights to intervene as they see fit in relationship to stated opinion, political or otherwise. And it's not good. It's seriously not good. And there's new legislation coming up also reflecting that lack of proper constitutional protection that will make even the suspicion that a crime may be committed punishable. That's Bill C-63.
I'm just saying, in a fundamental sense, do you think there should be a warrant requirement before some financial institution hands over the name of the customer based on certain purchases they may have made? So in a general sense.
Yes.
You think there should be?
Yes.
That's great, because your colleagues don't think so. Now, let me go to this. Do you think, Mr. Michel, that if it can't do a warrant, do you think there should be at least a notification? So should at least the bank say, hey, Mr. Smith, the FBI just asked me for all your purchases on a certain date, and they want to know if you've ever bought a gun. Do you think that the bank should at least tell their customer who they're supposed to serve? Do you think they should at least be compelled to tell them that?
Yes.
Mr. Tedesco?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes, with reasonable exceptions for an ongoing criminal case.
Fair enough. Mr. Peterson?
They should get a warrant.
Let's get a warrant. Back to the first thing. Mr. Falone?
Again, with exceptions for criminal investigations.
We got agreement on the panel. The first time we've had that this morning. Dr. Peterson, I want you to talk about the debanking issue we saw so much of, and how that was, particularly I guess with the truckers, and how that's, because I see it coming. I see it coming here, and it frightens me. I want you to talk about what took place in Canada and if it in any way impacted you.
Well, there was essentially a working class protest against the extensive length of the COVID lockdowns. And one consequence of that was that Canadians who participated, even by donating to the protest and even by donating small amounts to the protest, had their bank accounts seized in consequence of a collusion between the banks and the government that was extrajudicial, that was recently deemed unconstitutional, despite the fact that we don't have strong First Amendment claims. So this happened. The government is currently maneuvering in Canada to make the possibility of such collusion a certainty across multiple actual and potential domains of so-called harm, particularly in relationship to government-defined hate. Yes, this is absolutely coming, and it's facilitated by the kinds of advancements in technology that we talked about today.
Yeah, we know it's coming because we've seen what do they call it? The liaison information report from the FBI to the bank saying possibly include firearm legislation, the easing of immigration status, new limits on public land, and discontent with renewed measures to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. So the very issue that these truckers were debanked in Canada is the very thing the government is saying to banks, we need to look at this as well. That single issue. That is, again, what frightens me so much.
Who would you consider to be the biggest victims of this surveillance operation?
I think it's the American citizens, and I think it's a bipartisan issue. Some of the Democrats in this chamber and the Senate sent letters to the big banks just a few weeks ago, talking about de-risking. They call debanking de-risking. We're talking about the same thing of Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, including because of their religious donations and donations to charity. So it's a bipartisan issue, and I think we all should be concerned about it and try to work together for solutions.
No, I 100% agree with you. And you know, what do you think right now under the BSA, under the current structure, what is the remedy for Americans?
Well, there isn't much.
There is none, right? There is no mechanism for judicial review, right? So Americans cannot protest a bank who is ostensibly an arm of the government at this point. They cannot protest the disclosure of their financial transactions to the federal government. There's no mechanism for that, is there?
That's right.
And so, and obviously, they don't have any knowledge that their data was collected to begin with, do they?
Yeah, I think one of the scariest things I heard at this hearing was what Mr. Michel said, once the bank has the data, the government has the data.
Right. Can you hire a private security firm to search somebody's house without a warrant?
I don't think so, no.
No, you have to have a warrant. So what is the difference here?
It's a big risk, and it needs to be fixed.
So and you would articulate, let me ask you the panel this, do you think that under the current BSA or other laws that it would be wise, given where we are from a technological standpoint, do you think it would be wise to revisit the BSA or the other laws to provide that protection for Americans' privacy, sir?
Well, there were some concerns expressed earlier about what might happen in the aftermath, let's say, of Donald Trump's election with regards to political belief, and anything that facilitates the collusion between government and giant corporation and enables that kind of information gathering will absolutely be used in that way. That's why I made comments earlier regarding this as a bipartisan issue. Once this capability exists, and it's being magnified now, it will be used in all directions. So the people at risk will be politically active, vocal Americans. The silent ones will remain relatively safe. But anyone who speaks.
And briefly, do y'all think that we should examine?
We should absolutely examine it.
Agree.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from Florida is recognized.
Mr. Chair, I have a point of order. In your last statement, you said that Steve Jensen of the FBI opposed the collection of this information for banks. That's a misrepresentation of his testimony.
It's not an appropriate
Jensen
point of order.
said that the information was not used. Would you release the transcript so that we can hear exactly what Mr. Jensen said?
Not an appropriate point of order, and the gentlelady knows that, but she continues to try to ask
Same way you do.
question that is
Same
not a
way
point of order.
you interject.
I don't think
sir.
I've raised one point of order today.
You interject all the
The
time.
gentlelady from
sir.
Florida is recognized.
All the time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'm actually I continue to be stunned
by the big government advocates that we come across and the ones that serve in this very chamber. They're not even hiding it anymore. They're saying the quiet part out loud. They want dependency, they want control. And the total disregard for the Constitution and the oath that many of my colleagues, actually all of my colleagues, have taken and violated, it's so disturbing to me. Many people know, probably as evidenced by what is on the face of my iPad, that I detest big government and I detest big tech. The two combined have proven to be a lethal combination when it comes to liberty and freedom. Because quite frankly, we know that the MO of big tech and big financial institutions combined with big government, it's to erode and evade Americans' constitutional rights. And we're here today because of a blatant Fourth Amendment violation, where big banks colluded with big government to turn over data that didn't belong to them to target Americans, innocent Americans. Because in this country, it is still a fact that you are innocent until proven guilty, despite what everyone is trying to do and flip that around. Now, Dr. Peterson, it's good to see you again. I couldn't help but notice your reaction when my colleague was talking about the First Amendment not being absolute. And so I do want to give you the opportunity to weigh in and respond to that. I couldn't help but notice your reaction. But before I do, I am really glad that you have been talking about the social credit system that the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, utilizes. I am literally around the corner in a classified briefing right now talking about the use of big tech and how it is targeting American citizens. In fact, this very morning, I have been inundated in my office with phone calls from TikTok users who have been denied access to the app because they live in my congressional district, and until they call my office and demand that I do not take adverse action against the app, that they cannot use it. Talk about big tech directing behavior. I think that we are on a very dangerous path, and I want to give you my time to really lay out in the most succinct way possible the dangerous nexus of big tech, big government, and financial institutions that seek to weaponize that information against Americans. And I know you are more than capable of doing that in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
I don't think people understand the degree to which they are profiled online and to which their virtual representation is now an iconic representation of them, nor do they understand that they have no rights whatsoever to that representation. So for example, let's say we turn our information about our purchasing habits over to the bank when we open a bank account. 30 years ago, that wasn't such a big problem. With AI systems, it's a problem that's so big you can't imagine it. I mean, I'm certain that my staff could find the data online to absolutely predict your voting patterns with 95% accuracy. You have no idea what sort of digital footprint that you're leaving behind you, and there are almost no protections for that. And so now, and you also asked about the First Amendment.
Yes.
Well, we have very weak free speech protections in Canada, and I can tell you that is not going well. And so the combination in my country, the combination of that and the invasive technology that we're producing at a rate that beggars the imagination, produces a threat to the integrity of sovereign citizenship, the likes of which has not yet been experienced. Right? And that's what this committee should be concentrating on. Like, it's very interesting to watch it because it devolves continually into discussion of a particular event, serious though that event was. It's like, no matter how serious that event was, it pales in comparison to the potential severity of the issue that we're attempting to point to with regards to our testimony. These artificially intelligent systems can do things you can't imagine. And not only can they are and they will. And that will be abetted by the collusion between large corporations and government. And it's certainly the case that the people who stand on the left, especially with regards to their, what would you say, skepticism of large corporations, which is often perfectly warranted, should be utterly terrified about this.
Man, you did that in less time than I thought.
Well, I had to get it right once today.
No, I appreciate that. And I think you have seen it front and center. Certainly, we all watched in horror as the truckers' bank accounts were seized, were shut down, who protested the mandates. And People think that that's such a faraway concept, but we have seen that here with people who have been given ultimatums of jab or job, and we've seen ways that they've been targeted and positioned in ways that are just un-American, unconstitutional. So thank you all to our witnesses for being here today. I appreciate you guys in the fight against weaponization, and we're seeing it more and more every day. Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield.
Gentlelady yields back. This concludes today's hearing. We thank our witnesses for appearing before the subcommittee today. And I apologize, I do have to run out to another thing, but we really appreciate the discussion that you all brought and the analysis that you brought today. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses or additional materials for the record. Without objection, the hearing is adjourned.
Yeah, you being digitized.
BRICS countries, Western countries, all on board for Agenda 2030. The people in charge of climate finance for the UN, Mike Bloomberg, the billionaire, and Mark Carney. I think your viewers know enough about Mark Carney to know why that's insane. And to think that Mark Carney and Jamie Dimon and Mike Bloomberg and Bill Gates and all of these guys just care so much about the planet and not about robbing you of all of your wealth, which is what they've spent their entire careers doing. Come on, guys. We have to like watch what people do and like judge them by their actions.
At first glance, the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which, amongst other things, aims to end poverty and hunger in all forms and dimensions, and protect the planet from degradation through sustainable consumption and production, and taking urgent action on climate change, seems like the perfect idea, one that will end all the rife in the world and bring everlasting peace and healing to our planet. However, the people at the helm of global affairs have never been known not to have a hidden agenda. It's no different this time. Not only have our leaders promised on behalf of peoples everywhere to end the terrible situations they've caused and continue to cause with their greed, but they've also put some very questionable characters in charge of saving people from hunger and the planet from degradation. According to the UN, the agenda will be achieved through a global partnership that will bring together governments, the private sector, civil society, the United Nations systems, and other players. The private sector here includes big tech, big pharma, large commercial banks, and investment firms run by the 1% of the 1%, and the leading civil society is no other than the highly controversial World Economic Forum. It is quite difficult to believe that billionaires who emit at least 1 million times more carbon than the average person with their yachts and jets and through their many corporations actually care about saving the planet. The actual goal here is quite different, and according to popular investigative journalist Whitney Webb, it is more sinister and terrifying than you can ever imagine. During a recent interview with TFTC, Webb reveals that the global 1%ers, through this Agenda 2030, plan to completely subjugate humans and impose some very diabolical limitations on private property ownership. Ever heard the phrase, "You'll own nothing and be happy"? This is the exact future the human race faces if immediate actions are not taken to end these terrifying plots. We will now bring you clips from Whitney's interview as she speaks further about this partnership, the plans for a digital ID for everyone, and how they will use chaotic incidents like shutting off the internet to get everyone more agreeable to their plans. As you watch, please share and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Thank you and enjoy the video.
I mean, what we have right now is them literally tokenizing all their existing rackets to move it into this new, like, fourth industrial revolution paradigm. That's literally what is happening across the board, and people just, like, don't recognize it. And they're cloaking it in all this stuff, like, specifically with, like, SDGs and Agenda 2030. It's like, this will make a better world. And then you actually, like, look at it and it's like, this is insane. Why are all bankers in charge of this? I hate it so much. But I mean, you go back into like the UN, like the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, like at the end of the 90s was like, yeah, so you know how we used to be at least viewed as like the public sector, you know, the public sectors of the world all coming together to like democratically vote on stuff. Well, now we've basically been taken over by corporations, and now the business of the businesses of the world is our business, you know? I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said. In order to create this space where they want to like push people into this new system, there's going to be chaos and there's going to be instability. And so the comfort and convenience that keeps people asleep will be disrupted. What people do in that point in time is the most critical about this whole thing, about how it plays out. Seriously, like that is the most important window. And again, that is why it's so important to be local. Because, okay, there's a big cyber tech on the financial system. The internet goes down for a couple of days. What are people going to do? They're going to go out in the street and look for answers, figure out what's going on. This is why it's important to know what's going on and couple that with having, you know, connections in your local community so you can direct people about what needs to be done and what's happening at that point in time. It's like very important. Well, also the internet, when it turns back on, isn't going to be like the internet now. At all. They're going to put AI in charge of like literally all content. Your ID is going to be tied to not just everything you post online, but everything you read and consume, every site you visit. And they plan to pass all of that through AI to determine if you're a threat to the system or not. This is all like predictive policing. All of this stuff is built into this system. Specifically in the US, the Biden administration already has the policy framework developed. They've had it since, I mean, they first came into power in 2021. Eric Schmidt, right, who basically runs like AI national security policy for the US too, and is like funding all this science and technology policy stuff. Basically, key officials in that of the Biden administration are being paid, their salaries are being paid by Eric Schmidt. It's like super illegal, and Politico reported on it and like nothing was done. They were like, well, I see you found out, and that is that. That guy has an insane amount of power. He was just on a podcast talking about what needs to be done about misinformation. And he was saying, we need to get everyone's ID tied to social media. And then when people post misinformation, report them to law enforcement. Remember how that guy posted stuff about how he hated Joe Biden and how Joe Biden shouldn't come in his neighborhood and all this stuff on Facebook? And then the FBI shot him in front of his house. And he was like an old disabled guy. Eric Schmidt's idea is a very bad idea. It's a very bad idea. Eric Schmidt is also a dangerous fascist who controls a large amount of US government policy right now, and how the government and the intelligence agencies and the military plan to use AI.
In a 2023 report, the Europol Innovation Lab estimated that by 2025, about 90% of the content available on the internet will be produced with the help of artificial intelligence. According to Whitney, the plan is to subjugate the entire global population and ensure that humans can no longer think for themselves. This will make us subservient enough to take anything the ruling class offers us so they can keep their throne while we keep whatever little trinkets they hand down. She further reveals that there are well-formed plans to put artificial intelligence in charge of the internet. AI will not only be in charge of censoring everything that appears on the internet, but will also be used to make the lion's share of online content. With AI dominating the information environment, whoever programs AI and stipulates the information it's allowed to publish or approve will dictate how people think, when they think, and what they are allowed to think about. When these diabolic plans are fully in motion, Whitney warns that people's cognitive abilities will be so completely diminished that we won't be able to perceive reality or make sense of anything without AI doing it for us. So, how do we stop what's coming? What are the actions you can take today to protect your finances, your data, your family, and your community? Whitney shares some ideas in the other half of the interview. Here are more clips from the interview.
And so what has to be done is people have to divest from Silicon Valley and Wall Street as much as possible. Because basically, what I call the blob that basically runs the US, it's the national security state, it's Silicon Valley, and it's Wall Street, okay? It's harder to divest from the US government if you're living in the US than it is to divest from big tech and Wall Street. You can take your money out of JP Morgan and Wells Fargo and Citi, and you can stop using Google products, Microsoft products. You can not use OpenAI maybe, which is basically Microsoft, and all of this other stuff, because they plan to do a lot of bad stuff with your data, like a lot of very bad things. Here's an example that's very blackpilling. Sorry, everybody. Okay, so what's going on right now in Israel, right? The IDF uses an AI algorithm that they literally call the gospel. And they said, the IDF officials have said that before the gospel, they identified 15, 20 targets to assassinate in Gaza a day. Now that they use the gospel, the AI algorithm identifies hundreds, right? And what are the metrics for identifying who gets to live and who dies? Well, they won't tell anybody. But a lot of the people that have been killed have been women and children. Was it because they liked a post that Hamas made on a social media network? Was it because their cousin is in Hamas? Was it because they went to a person's house who a relative of Hamas lives there? I mean, it's very broad, isn't it? No one really knows. So it's very likely that because of the surveillance dragnet that Israeli cybersecurity companies test out first in Palestine and then export around the world, because that cybersecurity segment of Israel's economy is like a major part of their GDP. And they test it out there, right? So Palestinians are some of the most surveilled, data harvested people on the planet. This data that's been harvested on Palestinians is now being used to decide which of them are blown up or not.
Yeah.
What happens when we get to that point? Do you know who runs the AI weapons stuff in the US that's also being tested? Not just, I mean, Israel has their own, but the US has it too. It's being tested in Ukraine to decide who lives and dies. It's Peter Thiel and Palmer Luckey, who created Oculus, which was sold to Facebook because of Peter Thiel and all of this stuff. It's the same crowd. Peter Thiel runs Palantir, that you harvest your data for intelligence agencies. Every intelligence agency in the US uses it, and it profiles people, and they can label you as subversive. And Palantir is the outgrowth of total information awareness that I mentioned earlier. Palantir was literally created to replace that. It's involved with the border stuff too.
Well,
they have this huge surveillance, autonomous dragnet on the border Anduril set up. It's obviously not stopping people from coming in. Is it to stop people from coming out? They want everyone's data. I mean, data has been a huge part of this play for a really long time. And now we're giving away more of our data than ever, and more intimate parts of our data. And now they have tools that use that data that can do awful things if we let them. And it doesn't mean we have to live without AI or any of this stuff. Like, if you want to use it, okay, but we have to divest from big tech AI, because they are trying to use AI to turn us into a giant underclass of subhumans who, I mean, this Kissinger-Schmidt book is so crazy, and I encourage everyone to read it, because they literally lay out that it's going to create neo-feudalism. They don't use that term, but basically they say there will be two classes of people. There will be the people that program and maintain and set the objective functions of AI. And then there will be the people that AI acts upon, who lose the ability to understand what AI is doing to them. Yeah, that's neo-feudalism, but obviously it's big tech and everyone else is essentially what that is. And the people who set the objective function, I'm sure, will be like existing oligarchs and existing power elites. Yeah. Well, once that system's in place, you're not going to break and get into the top tier. Like, that's over. You know, AI will act on you, will manipulate you in ways you don't understand, and you won't be able to tell what's real and what's not. And that AI, well, first of all, AI hallucinates, like, that's the term. It will produce output that isn't even real and doesn't exist. And they argue in this book that AI will push us into this era of unseen realities, and that only AI can see, and we should trust that those are real because AI is super smart. Yeah. And so I mean, this is like Matrix level shit to an insane degree.
It's no news that the government surveils citizens everywhere. But it is not just your government surveilling you, it's everyone. Big tech, big pharma, social media platforms, shopping websites. Everyone seems to be in on this grand conspiracy, except for affected citizens. They all want the lion's share of your data, because in the new world order they are building, whoever controls the data controls the world. But only those who are unprepared will be meekly agreeable. Your gold and silver stacks will differentiate you from the subjugated and help you better suited to protect your family and loved ones. What are your thoughts on Whitney's simple, insightful explanation? How are you preparing for what's coming? Please drop your comments and observations in the comments section below.
You think if you've cheated in computer games in past or in future that you're going to still be able to use the internet? If you're a hacker, you're not going to be locked up in a security jail underground somewhere in the middle of bloody nowhere with no chance of ever having technology access ever again in your life. You think that you can commit crimes and, whatever it is, I won't go into details, domestic and otherwise, or you want to do digital crime, or you want to do, business crime, you want to steal, you want to break into people's houses, whatever it is, let alone cheating computer games. You don't think your digital ID and the super advancement of AI is not going to be able to look back in your entire life, look at everything you've ever done on the internet, and then give you a score of 5 out of 1,000? Yes, everyone will get 1,000 credits, it is predicted and forecast, once the digital ID system comes in. This digital ID system will be after a major worldwide outage of the internet for up to a week. Now, most probably it'll be down for 24 hours. Everyone will go out in the street losing their freaking minds. All these people will have, withdrawal symptoms from the internet addictions they've got. And look, internet's as much of a utility now as electricity and water is, and land rates are, yeah, and council rates. It's part of life. Can't get away from it. And if you don't have it, you are massively disadvantaged compared to anybody else. So when you think about the AI development side of things, it's going to need to be policed very, very heavily. And you, with your biometric signature, you as a person will be recorded digitally. Anything you have done on the internet or will do on the internet in the future will be graded. And for any of you that have cheated in computer games, hacked computer games, or a hacker, or committed any fraud online, or credit card skimming, anything like that, anything you've done, and don't think you're going to be safe in the deep and dark web, you idiots are going to be the first to go to jail, right? And then it's going to be more of your consumer customers will end up losing all their credit and not have any access to the internet other than emergency services and basic things. I've been trying to warn people for 5 years about this, not necessarily online, but in real life, that this is going to happen at some stage. Well, it's 2024 now, and it is a very real fact that this stuff like this is going to happen in our very, very near future, which scares the hell out of me, because I was expecting 2040, 2050. Weren't you? It's happening now. And there is overwhelming evidence, irrefutable evidence. You've got software engineers in complete denial that it's already happened, but accepting it at the same time in their second breath. But they still won't accept that they're going to be made obsolete because, they're pinnacles of the IT industry. No, you're not. You are engineers. You are just like anybody. You do a thing. You don't know how to run the business. You don't know how to employ and train and hire and fire people. You just do a job. You are a cog in that machine, no matter what business model it is. So people need to start preparing for our actual real and imminent future now. You need to stop putting on the wool over the eyes and being a naysayer. Stop denying the truth to yourself, ignoring the fact that you need to upskill, upgrade, to just reinvent yourself as we speak to prepare for this. I have already gone and done that just now myself, from being a senior corporate executive to then going into teaching to thinking, I can better the workplace and hopefully help people get to where they need to get to in life and not have to worry about when they're in their middle working life or their later working life, worry about the advent of AI in 20 years, to come to a very abrupt halt because of a con man and a psychopath that tried to murder me in the workplace because he was a fraud, and he has now disappeared off the face of the earth. Police can't even find him. He's got taken care of by somebody. He's pissed a lot of people off. To then go through my struggles of adjustment disorder and CPTSD, to now come out on the other side of that finally and realise my situation, my position in all this. And it's serendipitous it did happen this way to me, because if it hadn't, I'd still be teaching, I'd still be trying to help people, not realising the reality that we're about to all face, and have wasted a bunch of years of my life getting people qualifications on paper that will literally be useless very, very soon. Don't waste your time doing TAFE. That's why it's free, because it's just to keep you busy and keep you focused away from what is really happening around you. Don't watch the news. Don't participate in stupid drama crap on the internet. You are literally getting distracted from what's really going on around you. And that's exactly what the governments of the world want. That's exactly what the social media giants want. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, X, formerly Twitter. All of those social media don't want you or Nvidia or AMD or Intel or any of the IT industry want you to be focusing on. This is what I'm saying to you is now what you need to be focusing on. Switch off, take the red pill and wake up, because if you do not, you will get washed under the waves of this tsunami of artificial intelligence before you know it. This is no joke, guys. This is not a put on.
People who get Social Security may see a higher increase than expected next year.
Former President Donald Trump was asked on CNBC this week if he'd considered changes to entitlement programs such as Medicare and Social Security. Let's watch.
In the sphere of global economics and politics, there are moments when the stage seems set for a dramatic upheaval. Such a moment is upon us. The whole system is going to come crashing down soon, thanks to the government's sinister plan. It's time to gear up and prepare to avoid being swept away by this impending storm. The enemy is within the city gates. Paul Revere's legendary midnight ride, immortalized in American history, recounts his urgent mission to warn of an impending British attack. It was on April 16, 1775, when Revere first received intelligence about a planned raid on Concord. Speculation suggests that these crucial tips might have come from General Gage's wife, an American sympathetic to her countrymen's cause. Armed with this vital information, Revere swiftly organized plans to alert the countryside by horseback, informing them of the imminent arrival of British forces intent on seizing military supplies. The strategic routes the British could take, land through the Boston Neck or by sea across the Charles River, prompted Revere to arrange a signal at the Old North Church. One lantern would signal a land approach, while two lanterns indicated a sea route, preparing the local militias and citizens for the impending threat. As dawn broke on April 18, 1775, 700 British soldiers, led by Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith, assembled on Boston Common and embarked on ships bound for Concord. This force included grenadiers at the front lines hurling grenades and light infantry units. Meanwhile, Revere, accompanied by fellow riders William Dawes and Samuel Prescott, embarked on their historic rides, rallying Minutemen and alerting the populace to the imminent danger. Now, 249 years later, if a horseman were to ride through the city with a warning, it wouldn't be about an external enemy, but one right within our city gates, the very ones who are supposed to lead, govern, and protect. Economists caution against resorting to money printing during economic crises due to the risk of hyperinflation. Nevertheless, the U.S. opted for COVID-19 stimulus measures that essentially involved printing money. The U.S. Federal Reserve injected around $3 trillion into the economy during the pandemic. Within 3.5 months, from March 2020 to June 2020, the Fed's balance sheet swelled from $4.16 trillion to $7.17 trillion. This figure ballooned further to approximately $9 trillion by April 2022 due to Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. In essence, the U.S. addressed COVID-19 challenges by increasing money supply. Currently, economists attribute the ongoing inflation partly to the government's COVID relief package. Additionally, critics note that the Fed's money printing also funds U.S. engagements in the Middle East and beyond. Governments typically monitor public debt levels closely, with economists emphasizing the importance of keeping the debt-to-GDP ratio below 100%. However, the U.S.'s debt-to-GDP ratio has surpassed 123%, as reported by the International Monetary Fund. Despite concerns and predictions of a looming recession, the U.S. economy has remained resilient. This resilience can be attributed to the country's dominant position in the global economic and political landscape, particularly the dollar's status as the global currency. As of 2021, around 60% of global trade was conducted in U.S. dollars, indicating a significant global demand for the dollar that can absorb short-term excess supply. Dr. Ahsan H. Mansour, Executive Director of the Policy Research Institute, highlighted that the dollar's status as the global currency and its widespread use in trade and foreign reserves enabled the U.S. to manage excess money supply without immediate repercussions. This advantageous position of the dollar has allowed the U.S. government to make questionable decisions with minimal consequences for years. However, this scenario is poised for a change, and the system is at risk of collapsing like a house of cards. Predictably, the U.S. government is unlikely to acknowledge that its poor decision-making led to the impending catastrophe. Instead, blame may be shifted to the rise of BRICS currencies. Yet the underlying truth remains that BRICS nations have diligently worked, while the U.S. government continues to borrow excessively and make irresponsible fiscal choices regularly. Over the last century, the U.S. federal debt has surged from an inflation-adjusted $403 billion in 1923 to a staggering $33.17 trillion in 2023. As the next bout over the debt ceiling approaches early next year, an agreement reached to raise it in May of the previous year is set to expire in January 2025. In a 2023 op-ed published in Foreign Policy, former White House economist Joe Sullivan highlighted growing concerns about the potential emergence of a currency from BRICS nations that could rival the U.S. dollar in global trade. Such a currency could challenge the dollar's status as the dominant reserve currency and its position in global trade markets. Sullivan warned that the collective influence of BRICS, which recently expanded to include Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, could pose a substantial threat to the dollar. Notably, the inclusion of Egypt, Ethiopia, and Saudi Arabia could grant BRICS control over a significant portion of global trade, amounting to 12% due to their strategic location around the Suez Canal, a vital conduit for international trade. Sullivan highlighted the significant influence of the BRICS bloc in commodities markets. Key members like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates rank among the world's top exporters of fossil fuels, while Brazil, China, and Russia are major exporters of precious metals. The inclusion of Saudi Arabia in particular could provide BRICS Plus with a substantial advantage. Saudi Arabia holds over $100 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds, contributing to BRICS's total holdings in U.S. Treasuries exceeding $1 trillion, according to Sullivan. He emphasized that the BRICS Plus nations don't need to wait for a shared trade currency to meet the typical conditions of a global reserve currency before leveraging their strengthened economic position against the dollar. Despite resounding warnings of looming catastrophic hyperinflation in the U.S., the government continues to downplay these concerns and promote optimistic narratives in the media to keep the average American unaware of the impending crisis. A stark historical example of hyperinflation occurred in the Weimar Republic of Germany after World War I. In attempting to pay war reparations and stimulate economic growth simultaneously, the German government printed excessive amounts of money, leading to a massive imbalance between supply and demand. This resulted in an astonishing inflation rate of 322% per month, or an annual rate exceeding 3 billion % by November 1923. According to Anders Aslund of the Peterson Institute for International Economics, hyperinflation only happens under very special circumstances, including the breakup of a currency. That used to be enough assurance that the U.S. was safe, but now, that special circumstance is already in the works, as the BRICS nations are intent on usurping the dollar as soon as they get the chance. When this hyperinflation begins, a cup of coffee will cost $22, a gallon of milk will be $38, and a vial of insulin will cost over $1,000. But of course, who cares? An election is coming. Let's focus on that. The impending economic woes will sort themselves out. The system is about to crash. A CNN article sheds light on the extent of this precarious situation, where the economy is facing a coming crash, but political wars are drowning out any voice of caution. The president is gunning for a second term at all costs, regardless of the economic costs, and how this could potentially affect Americans. It's time to wake up. To make matters worse, Americans seem to be torn between the devil and the deep sea. Both President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump represent polarizing choices for many Americans, highlighting the desire for alternative options in the upcoming 2024 elections. Trump's potential second term appears poised to be even more unconventional than his first, marked by his vows to wield presidential power for retribution against his adversaries. On the other hand, Biden presents a more traditional option, warning of the tumultuous implications of another Trump presidency. However, Biden's campaign is facing challenges as he addresses concerns about his age and cognitive abilities, attempting to reassure voters of his capacity for a full second term. Trump, facing 91 criminal charges and legal setbacks for fraud, sexual misconduct, and defamation, remains a controversial figure. His attempts to contest the 2020 election results and his alignment with foreign leaders like Vladimir Putin over NATO allies have added to the complexities of his political image. Biden warns Trump is a danger to democracy, but the president is visibly aging while mixing up the names of foreign leaders. Meanwhile, Social Security benefits are running out. Due to amendments made to Social Security in 1983, benefits are projected to be fully payable until 2037, after which the trust fund reserves are anticipated to run out. Some analysts suggest this depletion could occur sooner, but the Office of Retirement and Disability Policy maintains that ongoing taxes should cover 76% of scheduled benefits once reserves are exhausted. Consequently, Congress will need to adjust both benefit levels and revenue sources for the program in the coming years. According to the Social Security Board of Trustees, implementing changes such as an immediate 13% reduction in benefits, raising the combined payroll tax rate from 12.4% to 14.4%, or a combination of these adjustments would ensure full payment of scheduled benefits for the next 75 years. Since its establishment in 1935, the Social Security program has consistently disbursed scheduled benefits punctually, adapting to ongoing legislative changes that will persist. Social Security ensures a fundamental monthly income for workers and their families upon reaching old age, experiencing disability, or passing away. With over 50 million beneficiaries, the program is funded by payroll taxes contributed by more than 150 million workers and their employers. Social Security serves as a crucial income source for millions of retirees during their retirement years. With more than a decade left before necessary action, Congress is actively considering various proposals to bolster Social Security's financial stability. The Social Security Administration regularly assesses these proposals' potential impact on the trust funds, yet tangible changes have yet to materialize. There's also a ticking bomb for Medicare, which has less time on the clock than Social Security does. The Medicare Board of Trustees anticipates that the Hospital Insurance Trust Fund, responsible for Medicare Part A benefits, will run out by 2031. This prediction marks an improvement from earlier estimates in 2022, which indicated insolvency by 2028. No thanks to frivolous government spending, these core programs are being threatened, and no one is saying anything about it. It's all about winning the election, and this plan will definitely bring the whole system down sooner than we imagine. It is time to wake up, prioritize long-term stability over short-term gains, and ensure that our actions today do not dig pitfalls for the economy.
Would I be making this video right now and going to this depth and this sincerity with you if this was not really happening? Think about that for a minute. Guys, look, we are at the end of an era and we're at the beginning of a very, very interesting future. It's up to you to make it a positive one or a negative one for yourself. Those of you that have already been cheating in computer games, you're a hacker, you're a dark web, deep web person of interest, your time's running out and you cannot hide. There is nowhere on this face of this planet you'll be able to hide. If a Mars mission comes up, sign up straight away. The only way you're going to get out of it. And with the current satellite situation, surveillance situation around the world, there is literally nowhere you can hide, even off-grid, anymore. For those of you that have done the right thing to date, like myself, you'll be fine. You'll get your 1,000 points of internet credit. Just don't do anything illegal on the internet and you'll be fine. You'll have access to all the information you'll ever want. Those of you who have not done the right thing, enjoy looking at the Google search box and not much else. You've been warned many times by a bunch of people all over the internet for years about this. Basically, a whole alpha generation is going to be kicked off the internet. A 2/3 amount of Z gens will be kicked off the internet. And a good third to a half of Y gens as well. And probably some X gens as well, to be honest with you. But that's the thing. If you choose to do the wrong thing, there are consequences in this world. And those consequences are resounding. You've been warned by so many people, but you chose not to listen. You chose not to do the right thing. Now you're going to pay for it. Karma comes and gets all of us one day. You do the wrong thing, you pay for it, and that's it. Now, whether it's a societal format or just the universe being the universe, karma's a bitch. Deal with it. Suck it up and live with the consequences of your actions, whether you like it or not. Those of you that haven't done the wrong thing, you are literally going to be the successors of today, not tomorrow anymore, today, and they will be the regressors, the people that will work for you. So if you're just a generally good person that's never really got a good foot up in life, guess what? Good guys win, finally, very soon. And And all the bad guys, just like in any villain, in any movie, in any of history, will be the ones that lose. The time for the bad guys, and the psychos, and the mental health patients, your time is up. Us good people, as said by, I think it's the Bible, the meek shall inherit the earth. What that means, guys, is the good guys always win in the end. That's it. That's my conversation. There's the facts. Don't want to live with it? Tough. Because that's what's happening, and no one is going to be able to stop anything now moving forward. Buckle up, princess, because it's a freaking rough ride for you. And for us good guys, get ready to sail boats to success. Enjoy the sun, enjoy the breeze, enjoy the birds. Enjoy the lovely, soft lapping waves of the ocean of success washing by. And as per usual, and as per always, peace out. Cheers.